Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into, well, it's a mountain of source material, really forum threads, digital archives, just years of compiled commentary.
That's right. And our goal is to synthesize all this discussion, which centers on a very high-profile and often pretty controversial figure in online political streaming.
We're talking about Hasan Piker, or HasanAbi as he's known online, and the sources we're looking at, they come from a specific online space dedicated to discussing figures like him.
Yeah, a forum known for, let's say, intense documentation. The material covers a hefty timeline, too, from mid-2021 right up to, well, basically today, October 2025.
And these sources pull no punches. They use labels like grifter, young Turk, even stun-locked progressive. We're not here to validate those labels ourselves, of course.
No, absolutely not. Our mission is to unpack why those labels are used in the source material, to look at the core accusations, trace the career trajectory they describe, and understand the controversies.
Especially the big ones. We'll be covering his political posturing, the whole connection with TYT and his uncle Sink Iger, his unique streaming style, and that very recent, very viral accusation involving his dog, Kaya.
It's quite a journey laid out in these threads, from alleged nepotism right through to what some critics are calling a potentially career-ending mistake. It's really a study in how online fame and controversy work these days.
Okay, let's dive in. Where do the sources typically begin this story? It seems like the foundation is always that TYT connection.
Yeah, that's definitely the starting point, and almost all the critical analyses we reviewed, they really hammer the nepotism baby angle hard.
So the claim is his entry into media wasn't exactly based on, climbing the ladder the usual way.
Not according to these sources, no. He got his foot in the door via his uncle, Sink Iger, who co-founded the Young Turks. He started there as an intern, then became a producer.
And the sources frame this as the key moment, the launch pad.
Absolutely. They describe it as a significant role in launching his career, basically arguing he wouldn't have had the platform he did without that family connection. It sets up this narrative of him being handed success rather than earning it through pure merit.
Which immediately creates tension, right? Given his later brand as a socialist critic of privilege and capitalism?
Exactly. It's the core irony his critics constantly point to. A self-proclaimed socialist whose initial big break, they argue, came directly from family privilege. It's a contradiction they never let go of.
So he gets this platform, partly through family ties, according to critics. How does he then build his own distinct persona? The sources seem to have a very specific read on this.
Well, they do. They describe him as this mix, a self-described progressive socialist, but also in a marabou, which seems to mean someone really intensely focused on, maybe obsessed with American politics and culture wars.
And also a himbo. That's a term that comes up a lot in the threads.
Yeah, the himbo label is pervasive, combined with the idea that he's, and this is apparently something he's even admitted, not very smart. It paints a picture of someone who's perhaps more about the aesthetic and the vibe than deep political theory.
It's the progressive brand they talk about, right? Like edgy socialist talk, but packaged in a marketable way.
Precisely. Edgy brocialist or progressive.
Right.
It allows him, the sources argue, to appeal to people genuinely into fair left ideas, but also to an audience that's maybe just there for the personality, the look, the drama.
And the whole not very smart thing, he actually uses that defensively.
Yeah, that's a fascinating point raised in the sources. He's apparently said outright that he avoids formal debates because he knows he's not the sharpest whip and sometimes says dumb things.
So instead of debating ideological opponents, he kind of preempts the criticism by admitting intellectual weakness?
It seems that way, according to the analysis. It allows him to control the narrative within his own space, maybe avoid situations where he could be easily challenged. But that didn't stop him from generating controversy within his own commentary.
Which leads us to maybe the first really huge defining scandal mentioned, the 9/11 comments involving Dan Crenshaw.
Ah, yes. This is presented as the quintessential Hasan Piker moment in the source material, the moment that really set the tone for how he'd handle outrage moving forward.
Look, well, what exactly happened there? He was talking about Dan Crenshaw, the politician and veteran.
Right, and in the context of U.S. foreign policy, interventionism, that kind of stuff, he started talking about Mujahideen fighters. And then he dropped the line, America deserved 9/11, dude.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that would definitely cause some ripples.
Ripples is putting it mildly. The sources detail the explosion online. Twitch hit him with a 1-week suspension pretty quickly.
But the sources seem almost more focused on the apology tour afterwards, particularly the appearance on TYT with Sink.
Oh, absolutely. That TYT segment is dissected frame by frame in the threads. Critics paint it as this incredibly awkward public shaming, basically Tank having to step in and, as the sources colorfully put it, pull his fat out of the fire.
So less a genuine apology and more like damage control orchestrated by his uncle?
That's the interpretation, yeah.
Okay.
And the nature of the apology itself is what really drew criticism. He didn't exactly walk back the sentiment.
How did he try to justify saying America deserved 9/11?
It was this semantic argument. He insisted he said America deserved it, not Americans, trying to frame it as a critique of the U.S. government, the state, the military-industrial complex, rather than, the people who died.
A very fine distinction to try and make in that context.
Extremely fine. And critics noted he also immediately pivoted. He kind of glossed over the initial comment about the Mujahideen and started blaming Israel and the people who funded the attackers.
So deflect and reframe. Generate the outrage, then offer a sort of technically defensible, politically palatable explanation that shifts focus from the most inflammatory part.
That's exactly the pattern the sources identify. Maximize the shock value, get the attention, weather the temporary ban, then issue a carefully worded non-apology that redirects blame. Critics saw it as proof that the outrage was the point, a tool for growth.
Okay, so that incident kind of establishes the playbook. How does this translate into his everyday streaming? The sources talk a lot about community curation and stun locks.
Yeah, the day-to-day streaming style is a huge focus. The sources describe his online community as almost hermetically sealed. Meticulously crafted and constantly pruned from wrongthink is a phrase that comes up.
Pruned from wrongthink, so basically heavy moderation to keep out dissenting views.
It seems to go beyond standard moderation, according to the critics. It's about maintaining ideological purity. Anyone questioning him, pointing out contradictions, like about his wealth, or even just disagreeing politically, gets removed very quickly.
And this curated community, they generate their own sort of internal culture, memes and things.
Apparently so. The sources mention cringe memes, often related to following his social advice, this Chadvice thing, supposedly to seem smart or impress people.
Advice? What's that about?
It's described as this series where he, positioned as this reformed internet goblin, gives out social tips, advice on dating, confidence, that sort of thing.
Huh. A political streamer giving dating advice.
Yeah, it's another one of those contradictions the sources highlight. We'll probably touch on that again later. But the main event, the thing critics seem almost obsessed with tracking, are these stun locks.
Right, the stun locks. What exactly is a stun lock according to these forum definitions?
It's their term for these intense outbursts he apparently has, like full-blown tarred rage, as they offensively call it, or just extended tirades. And crucially, they're directed at his own chat.
Not at opponents, but at the people watching and subbing to him.
Exactly. And these aren't just quick moments of anger. The sources document instances lasting like half an hour, even up to a full hour, where he's just yelling at commenters.
An hour? What could possibly trigger that kind of reaction from your own audience?
The sources have actually compiled a list of triggers based on observation. It seems pretty specific. Arguing with him, obviously, sounding like a Trump supporter, or even just a mainstream liberal.
Okay, standard political divisions.
But also saying something positive about Israel or saying something negative about Turkey, unless it's specifically targeting Erdogan. Pro-police comments are a no-go, and dead-naming someone is another trigger mentioned.
So wait, he avoids debating actual political opponents because he might say dumb things, but he'll spend an hour screaming at a random chatter who stepped slightly out of line ideologically.
That's the core irony the sources point out relentlessly. They call it gladiatorial combat with his chat. All that energy, that antagonism, is focused inward, policing his own bubble, rather than engaging with the outside world.
It keeps the echo chamber pure, I guess. Is there a specific example of one of these stun locks they focus on?
There's one anecdote that gets referenced a bit. Apparently, a viewer typed something simple like Hasan starts noticing, just implying he was picking up on a pattern or something.
Right.
And Piker apparently went off just a prolonged rant, screaming at this person, calling them an incel Nazi.
For typing Hasan starts noticing. Wow.
Yeah. Critics interpret these moments as, like, ritualistic purges, performative rage to scare off dissenters and reinforce loyalty among the remaining viewers. They see the sheer amount of time spent fighting his own chat as a sign of deep insecurity about defending his views openly.
It's a really strange dynamic, though you mentioned the Chadvice earlier. The sources actually find some value there amidst all the politics and rage.
It's bizarre, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, they do concede, almost grudgingly, that some of the advice in that series, filtered through his whole progressive himbo lens, was actually considered, useful.
Like what kind of useful advice?
The specific example that seems to stick in their minds is him giving advice on how to perform oral sex properly.
Okay, didn't see that coming. From revolutionary socialist commentary to that.
It perfectly captures the contradiction, doesn't it? The sources paint this picture of a figure who is simultaneously advocating radical political change, banning dissent, and offering practical, if crude, sex tips. It's a unique brand.
Which, I suppose, leads us directly to the biggest contradiction of all, the one that earns him the grifter label in these forums, the champagne socialist paradox.
Bingo! This is where the criticism really coalesces. The sources argue, consistently and forcefully, that his entire socialist persona is just an act, a performance to make money.
So socialism, for the clicks, for the subs.
Socialism for the mansion, essentially. They relentlessly call him a champagne socialist or a limousine liberal, arguing the radical politics are just a vehicle to fund an incredibly luxurious lifestyle.
And they have specifics to back this up. It's not just general grumbling.
Oh, they have specifics. The real estate details are meticulously documented. They pinpoint his house in Los Angeles, 138 and Edinburgh Ave.
Just citing the address.
Yeah, they go into detail. It's described as nearly 3,900 square foot mansion, 5 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, on a pretty large lot for LA, over 6,600 square feet, with a fenced backyard.
Okay, yeah. A 5-bed, 6-bath mansion in LA does kind of clash with the bourgeoisie rhetoric.
Kinda. It's the absolute embodiment of bourgeois success, according to the critics. They see it as undermining every single word he says about wealth inequality or the evils of capitalism. How can you preach revolution from a multi-million-dollar mansion with 6 bathrooms?
And it's not just the house, right? There were other lifestyle things mentioned.
Correct. His gym membership gets brought up frequently. Apparently, he spends a lot of time at Equinox.
Which is known for being not cheap.
Exactly. It's a luxury gym chain. So the image painted is the radical socialist fighting the system. After his expensive workout at an exclusive gym, before driving home to his massive house. The sources argue the politics are purely instrumental to maintaining that lifestyle.
The sources also seem to get into his psychology a bit, throwing around terms like cowardice and narcissism.
They do. There's a specific claim, often repeated in the threads, that the reason he left Turkey originally was because he was terrified of getting drafted into the military.
Implying he talks tough but avoids any real personal risk or hardship.
That's the implication. And they contrast this alleged fear of real-world consequences with what they claim is his private fantasy, that if the Marxist revolution he preaches ever actually happened,
he'd be leading it.
He supposedly sees himself as being part of the new elite, like a high-ranking party official, a Lenin or a Mao figure in this hypothetical revolution.
Which is quite a leap from streaming video games and reacting to news clips.
To say the least.
Yeah.
And the sources then immediately contrast this alleged grandiosity with the reality of his audience, who they describe, rather unkindly, as mostly soft-coddled suburban types.
Well,
people, they argue, who have zero experience with real struggle and would be the last people to actually participate in a violent revolution.
So the leader and the followers are both seen as insulated from the reality of the ideology they espouse.
That's the core critique there. Beyond the lifestyle stuff, the sources also point to more concrete ethical lapses, things that go beyond just hypocrisy, like the incident with his editor.
Right, that came up. What was the story there? It was back in, late 2019?
December 2019, yeah. The accusation was that he was basically exploiting an editor who was creating his YouTube videos, highly profitable videos, mind you, without proper pay, and apparently reneging on a promise of a full-time job.
That sounds pretty bad, especially for someone championing workers' rights.
Precisely. And the kicker, according to the sources, is that he only paid the editor what they were owed after the whole thing blew up publicly and started getting negative attention.
So damage control again. Only doing the right thing when forced by bad PR.
That's how critics framed it. Another piece of evidence, for them, reinforcing the grifter narrative, that his ethics only align with his supposed principles when his reputation or income is on the line.
Okay, and before we get to the absolute latest crisis, there's one more really serious accusation in the source material regarding his rhetoric, something about political violence.
Yes, this is probably the most disturbing recurring theme critics highlight. They observe that Piker seems to get significantly more excited and animated when the topic turns to political violence or even terrorism.
More animated than usual. That's chilling.
It is. They connect it back to how he navigated the 9/11 comments. But it goes further. The sources allege, and again we're reporting the allegation here based on specific clips, that he actually told his audience, explicitly, to kill Senator Rick Scott.
To kill a sitting senator, that's an incredibly serious claim.
Extremely serious. And it's presented by critics not as a one-off slip, but as part of a pattern, suggesting either a genuine ideological commitment to, or at least a deep public fascination with, extreme violent actions.
It really paints a picture of how insulated his bubble became, doesn't it? If he could allegedly say things like that, survive the 9/11 comments, weather the exploitation claims.
Exactly. His core audience, presumably, either agreed with the extreme anti-establishment sentiment or was willing to overlook it because it fit the overall brand of edgy transgression they signed up for. He seemed politically untouchable within his sphere.
Which makes what happened next, the dog controversy, so utterly fascinating from an analytical perspective.
It really is the crux of the most recent analysis, because after years of weathering explicitly political and financial scandals, he stumbled onto something that, according to the sources, finally broke through the ideological barrier.
Kaya Gate. The sources dedicate a huge amount of space to this. It kicked off around October 7th, 2025.
Around then, yeah. And the key difference was the speed and breadth of the spread. This wasn't just contained to political subreddits or his usual critics. It went everywhere.
Like where?
Massive general interest subreddits. Places like Radius 33 Productions, our Livestream Fail, our Destiny, which has its own complex relationship with him, but also places like Sir Molly Infuriating, places normies hang out.
And the core accusation was pretty simple and easy to grasp, wasn't it?
Painfully simple. That Hasan Piker was using a shock collar on his dog, Kaya. And not just using it, but using it specifically to keep her from wandering out of the camera frame during his streams. Essentially, zapping his dog to keep her positioned as a background prop.
Oh, man. Yeah, that hits differently than arguing about foreign policy.
Totally different. And there was specific video evidence circulated by critics, a clip time-stamped at 45 seconds where he appears to, well, do something that coincides with the dog reacting.
And then what?
Then immediately after, there's this distinct sound, which critics described as sounding like plastic, allegedly him putting the remote for the collar back down on his desk.
Yeah.
The implication being dog moved, got zapped, remote put down.
Yikes. And this is where the sources really lean into the irony, right? The sheer difference in reaction compared to everything else he's said or done.
It's the central observation. It is, as they say, striking, that advocating for political violence, allegedly telling people to kill a senator, defending 9/11, none of that had the same widespread visceral negative reaction as the accusation of mistreating his dog.
Why, though? Why did this stick when the other, arguably more objectively serious things didn't, at least not outside his critic circles?
Because animal abuse is universal. That's the core argument in the sources. It transcends politics. As one source bluntly puts it, the outrage united everyone, from the looniest troon to the staunchest chud, using the forum's own extreme language there to make the point, basically saying everyone, regardless of their political tribe, hates seeing a dog potentially mistreated. No one likes that shit.
It's a non-negotiable moral line for most people, way more than complex political debates.
Exactly. Political scandals require context, interpretation, ideological alignment. Seeing a video that looks like someone might be shocking their dog for convenience, that's immediate, intuitive, and almost universally condemned. The sources call it the kill shot.
A kill shot, because now, for the average person who maybe only sees him in viral clips, he's not the socialist streamer or Sink's nephew.
He's the guy accused of electrocuting his dog on stream. That association, critics argue, is permanent in the mainstream consciousness, in a way his political controversies never could be. It bypassed his carefully constructed defenses.
So, faced with this kind of universal backlash, how did he respond? The sources seem to suggest it wasn't exactly smooth sailing.
Not smooth at all. Critics, like Ethan Klein, who apparently covered it extensively, documented what they describe as a frantic, cascading series of denials, excuses, and contradictions. It reads like a masterclass in how not to handle a crisis where there's video evidence.
Okay, let's unpack that. What was the sequence of defenses, according to the documentation?
It was a real journey. First, the broad denial of intent. I don't use my dog as a prop.
Okay, standard opening.
Then, as people pointed out, she was always in the same spot. It shifted slightly. I don't force her to stay in one spot for hours. Subtle difference.
Right. Then the collar itself became the focus.
Yeah. So then it was minimizing the alleged harm. It doesn't hurt her.
Even if I did it, it's fine.
Kind of. Then a really weird one. It was dew claw. Trying to blame the dog's reaction on a dew claw issue, apparently.
That seems specific and maybe easily disproven.
It was quickly dropped, yeah. Then a flat denial of the tool. I don't use a collar.
But the video showed a collar.
Exactly. So that had to be revised. Okay, I do use a collar, but it's a vibration collar, not an electric shock collar.
Ah, the vibration defense. Common tactic.
Very common. But then the sound evidence, the plastic click challenged that. So it shifted again. It's not an electric collar, just denying the electric part.
Getting tangled now.
Totally. Then maybe focusing on the remote. I didn't have the remote in my hand at that moment.
Even though the clip allegedly showed him putting something down.
Right, which led to, okay, maybe I had it, but I didn't use it.
Almost there.
But back to minimizing. And even if I did use it, it doesn't hurt. We're back to square one, almost.
And the grand finale.
The ultimate deflection. She spoiled. As if buying expensive toys or food somehow negates the possibility of using a corrective collar improperly.
Wow. That is quite the list of shifting stories.
It's meticulously documented by critics as evidence of panic and dishonesty. Unlike the political stuff where he could hide behind ideology or semantic games, the visual evidence here, combined with the universal taboo, left him scrambling, or so the sources argue.
And what about his supporters? Did they buy these explanations?
His close circle, his orbiters, as the sources call them, definitely tried to run interference. Their main line was echoing the spoiled narrative, claiming Kaya is the best trained, most spoiled dog ever.
But was there evidence contradicting that?
Ironically, yes. Critics dug up old footage from a Christmas stream, which the sources documented, apparently showing Kaya lashing out and attacking another dog.
Oh, so not perfectly trained then.
Demonstrably not, according to that footage, which kind of undercut the whole defense that the collar, if used, was just a harmless training aid for an already perfect dog. If she's lashing out at other dogs, the training clearly wasn't flawless.
And how did Piker react to people publicly criticizing him over this, like other streamers?
His reaction also drew criticism. When figures like Tectone, another streamer, called him out on it, Piker apparently just blocked him.
Which critics would interpret as
basically admitting guilt, right?
Yeah.
If the accusations are baseless and you have a clear explanation, why block prominent critics instead of engaging with the criticism? It looked defensive.
So it all comes back to that core accusation that the dog was being treated as a prop.
That's the central theme in the Kaya Gate analysis. Despite living in this huge LA mansion with a big yard, the dog is allegedly made to sit on a specific military cot for hours on stream, in frame.
Instead of just letting her wander around the house?
Wow. The sources speculate quite harshly that he's just too lazy for proper training or regular walks to a dog park, and found it easier to keep her stationary using the collar and remote, ensuring she's always visible as part of the stream's aesthetic.
The dog as set dressing, potentially controlled with punishment. That's the accusation.
And that accusation, unlike the political ones, resonated far beyond his usual audience and critics. It seemed to strike a nerve that his previous controversies hadn't, potentially causing lasting damage to his wider public image.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. We've traced this narrative, based on the source material, from Hasan Piker's beginnings, framed as Cenk Uyghur's nephew getting a leg up.
Through the calculated outrage of the 9/11 comments, and the apology that wasn't,
to the creation of the progressive persona, the curated community, the infamous Stunlock rage sessions directed at his own chat.
then the stark contradiction of the champagne socialist living in luxury while preaching revolution, punctuated by accusations of exploiting labor and even endorsing political violence.
And finally, landing on Kayagate. The dog controversy that seemed to do what none of the political scandals could, make him a pariah outside his dedicated fan base.
It's really a fascinating trajectory. His career, as documented by these sources, is built on mastering performative outrage, weaponizing political extremism for attention, and maintaining incredibly strict control over his audience and narrative.
But the dog incident showed the limits of that control.
It seems so. It was the first major scandal that completely bypassed the usual political polarization. It hit a universal ethical line: animal welfare, potentially damaging his reputation in the mainstream in a way that even his most extreme political statements apparently never did.
So reflecting on this whole deep dive, what's the final provocative thought these sources leave us with? What should you, the listener, be mulling over?
I think the most striking takeaway from analyzing these forum threads is how they reveal something profound, maybe unsettling, about online communities and fame today. You see these highly polarized groups demonstrating immense tolerance for really serious ethical issues. Things like alleged labor exploitation or rhetoric that seems to endorse violence.
As long as it fits the ideology.
Exactly. If it aligns with the anti-establishment, anti-capitalist, or whatever the group's core identity is, it gets excused or even celebrated. But then An action that's seen as universally wrong, like mistreating an animal, something completely outside the political framework, suddenly becomes the breaking point.
It cuts through the ideological defenses.
Instantly. It makes the figure a mainstream villain in a way political controversy often fails to do. So the question these sources implicitly raise is, what is the actual bedrock ethical line for online figures now? And is the public instinctively more protective of a pet's welfare than they are concerned about the real-world implications of extreme political rhetoric? It's a really uncomfortable question about our priorities.
It definitely makes you think about the performance of online identity. Consider that link between the curated self-image, whether it's the himbo socialist or the base chat or whatever, and the lengths these figures apparently go to control their environment.
Yeah, from banning thousands of potentially paying viewers for minor disagreements to, in this alleged case, potentially using a device to control a dog's movement on camera.
It's all about maintaining that perfect, controlled narrative, isn't it? And the Kayagate situation, according to these sources, is just the most visceral example of what happens when that control slips, and the methods used to maintain it are exposed to a wider audience that doesn't share the initial ideology.
Absolutely. The curated reality bumps up against actual reality, and the fallout can be immense. A lot to chew on there.